Hi, everybody. So I have something I'm going to read later. That's why I brought that. So just a little background. Citizens Climate Lobby is a non-partisan, non-profit, okay, maybe I should hold this, is a non-partisan, non-profit organization. And we talk to everybody. That's kind of part of the religion, is we don't avoid talking to climate deniers. In fact, we love talking to them. So here are some ways you can get in touch with me and us and Lucid if you want to put the word out. We have groups in the local area, New York, New Jersey, Long Island. Some of those people are actually here tonight. Many of you may know this image from very recently. This is the Typhoon Haiyan, which was classified as a Category 7 super typhoon. We don't even have above Category 5 cyclones here in this part of the world. It's the most powerful storm ever recorded by science. The strongest wind speeds ever recorded, and that has a lot to do with ocean heat. The oceans absorb a lot of heat, so if you ever hear all of that mythology about there's a plateau in warming, the Earth isn't warming, and global warming stopped, and all of that stuff, the excess energy that the Earth is absorbing just keeps on climbing. And this is an example of that. At times, the heat is trapped more in the ocean than in the atmosphere, and at times it gets released, sometimes very rapidly and dangerously. And so you see what happened as a result of that. This is about cost, right? When you talk to people who don't understand the science of climate or who don't understand the morality of the issue, they do understand money. That's often what they're thinking about. And they haven't yet grasped the fact that this is already happening. We're not talking about 100 years into the future. This is another big storm. This is the largest, in terms of geographical area, cyclone ever recorded by science. That was Superstorm Sandy. It was 1,000 miles across in the concentrated storm system. And then, of course, there are peripheral weather systems that are actually part of it. And we know what that did. That created not only havoc in New York City and made New York the place on Earth that is spending more money on climate adaptation than anywhere else, right? We think of it as an affluent place that's relatively secure from the ravages of climate change, but actually we're the ones on the front lines here. The United States has been going through unbelievable record drought over the last few years. What happened during the Dust Bowl in the 1930s was more devastating to our economy because we were not as globalized as we are now. We weren't getting avocados from Peru, for instance, or bananas from the Philippines, at least not in the volume we do now. And so we couldn't as easily put off the effects of drought. The drought has been getting worse and worse and has actually affected more than 50% of all counties in the United States for more than 2 years. We go from extreme drought to what they call exceptional drought, which is, historically that didn't exist. It's exceptional because we never knew about it before. It's worse than the 1930s. And what it's doing is it's devastating our food supply. The relatively small state of Iowa, it's not a very large geographical area. It's the most productive piece of land for grain cultivation in the world. And the corn crop there, which is the main staple crop of Iowa's grain growing, is having some serious problems. And I want to read something that comes from that place. This was published just last month in a local newspaper in eastern Iowa by a man named Matt Russell. He's a farmer from Iowa. And he wrote, "4 generations of my ancestors made a living in Iowa's dirt. That proud legacy is under attack as extreme weather profoundly affects the productivity of Iowa's current farmers and of farmers to come. Climate change is wreaking havoc on my farm, my family members' farms, and every farm in Iowa. We had historic 500-year flooding in 2008. In 2010, we had another round of 100-year floods. In 2011, the Missouri River wiped away thousands of acres of farmland. In 2012, we shifted gears into a catastrophic drought. In half a decade, Iowa saw some of the worst flooding and the worst drought in more than a century of keeping records. This year ushered in a new level of extreme weather. We had the worst blizzard on our farm in 2 years during a May 4th snowstorm. A foot of heavy wet snow and 36 hours without power. I remember thinking, I suppose there's some place in the world where you can listen to frogs in the snow, but it shouldn't be happening in Iowa." And in case you were wondering if I really said that, I did. Climate change means the wrong weather at the wrong time. So for instance, right now, Colorado, which has also had record droughts and record flooding, is about to have the coldest temperatures it's ever had this week. Why is that climate change? Because it's unprecedented, it's extreme, and it's dislocated. This year, back to Matt Russell, the state also received the most rain ever recorded in the month of May. Then it shut off and we went back into drought with one of the driest Augusts on record, even drier than during last year's epic drought. July was one of the coldest on record, and then we had one of the hottest Septembers. So that's a problem because Iowa feeds the world. And there are other places that feed the world too, like Brazil and Kazakhstan and parts of the Russian steppes and Central Europe that are all experiencing drought at the same time, or some kind of weather-borne crop collapse, like flooding, for instance. And so what is all of this? This is costs. These are the costs we can quantify because they're actually in money to begin with. This is what we can look at in terms of subsidies that we actually pay to fossil fuel companies across the whole world, and then externalities that we know how to quantify, like the destruction of crops, for instance, or the destruction of the built environment. We know that comes from dislocated climate patterns, and so we can say, and a number of global institutions like reinsurance companies and the World Bank and the OECD are working very hard to figure out these numbers. We can say that's how much we're spending as a bare minimum now, right? So this is what you call a market failure. The market's supposed to be efficient. We were just talking about markets. The market for energy doesn't price energy correctly. We're paying those massive costs, but we think we're paying $30 or $40 at the pump for fossil fuels, right? In fact, almost every area of our lives has inflated prices because of the fossil fuel market failure. And it's probably the most dangerous economic trend that we're facing right now, because it's not just about the people invested in fossil fuels who have what you call carbon asset risk, where they might be overinvested in something that's going to collapse 20 years from now. But it's also about all the other things we do. For instance, our city might stop functioning suddenly. So, Citizens Climate Lobby, again, we're a group of citizens, and our job, what we've taken upon ourselves, is to try to talk to government about a way to solve this. And we have a policy that we think is the best way to do it. Historically, when people talk about a carbon tax, they're talking about what you call Pigovian taxation, a sin tax. The idea is you make something expensive and so people don't want to do it. You punish people for doing what you don't want them to do. So you raise the price of cigarettes and people stop smoking. The problem with that as a carbon tax is that it's in everything we do. It's not just people who made the choice to smoke who are emitting carbon dioxide. Every time you do anything, whether you like it or not, you're probably contributing to that problem. So if we just start taxing it to punish people, we're going to disrupt the economy in a really dangerous way. And that's why it's very hard for a carbon tax to move through unless it has a lot of special provisions and gets very complex, and there are lots of giveaways, and then it starts to turn into a service. So carbon fee and dividend basically says you have a market failure. You have people who are taking advantage of the rest of us. They're doing something that costs all of us a ton of money, but they're not paying for it. We're paying for it. They're socializing the cost of doing business. So let's make them pay for it. If you want to introduce coal or oil or natural gas or anything that emits climate-forcing gases, pay a fee to the American people. And that fee goes directly to households. The government doesn't get to keep it. It doesn't get to appropriate it for pet projects. It just goes straight to every household, and every household gets exactly the same amount in their check every month, not as a tax rebate. So you're not getting money back because you're richer and you earn more. You're getting the same check whether you're on food stamps or whether you're Donald Trump. So if you're Donald Trump, you better change your tune faster because you're going to start spending more on energy. And then that fee and so the dividend go up every year. You start out at $15 per metric ton, and you go up $10 a year, every year, until we stop burning fossil fuels. You want to keep doing it, you keep paying more and more. So eventually it becomes unaffordable to do business in that area, which it already is. It's unaffordable, but we're financing it. We're paying for it through everything else that we do, including government spending on things like public health and overseas wars, and unaffordable tax subsidies to businesses that after 100 years of so-called maturity still don't know how to make money on their own. This plan would actually reduce emissions by 90% below 1990 levels by 2050, and that's a conservative estimate. The reason is because it would be impossible to finance a fossil fuel operation after a certain amount of time. It's different than, say, a cap and trade model that says, here's what our goal is, let's try to hit that goal. Here, the goal is zero. It's just built in, it's automatic that that's going to be the goal. And so everyone else just catches up. The market does what it does, and people find ways to power their homes with wind and solar, which are naturally more reliable and more affordable. The problem is that there are 2,300 paid lobbyists in Washington, D.C. all day, every day, with massive budgets. Their job is to stop all of this from happening. Their job is to make sure that everybody here pays through every single thing they do for their cost of doing business, so that they can take the money and do what they will with it. Meanwhile, we're not just paying those costs, we're also building in future costs that are more and more expensive. So how do we counter that? Well, a few years ago, a man named Marshall Saunders, who worked for many years with an organization called Results, and also worked with another organization called the Grameen Bank, and who in his time of fighting global poverty initiated more than 1 million microcredit loans to rescue millions of families from poverty, decided that he wanted to do something like what Results does and organize citizen volunteers to talk directly to government and say, this is what you need to be doing. Here are the facts, here are the things that we want you to do. This is in our interest. You have sworn an oath, you have responsibilities. And make sure that message is never lost on them. Make sure that the 2,300 professional paid lobbyists are the black sheep, the ones that Congress doesn't want to talk to. And the citizens are the ones that they like talking to. So, in a sense, it's a really difficult job. People are scared about it. A lot of people are passionate about the environment, about the climate, but they get discouraged very easily. They have one disheartening conversation and they say, you know what, it's too hard. ExxonMobil has all the power, Congress is bought, and we can't do anything about it. But if you understand from the beginning that you have constant danger and safe return is doubtful, you may never get to your goal, but it is the thing that you should be doing, then you know that there is a reward in just actually doing it, in being a citizen and making things move in the right direction. Because if no one moves them in the right direction, they won't move in that direction. So what do? We organize ordinary citizens to lobby Congress. The goal is to build political will. Most elected officials, if they have any wisdom about what they're doing, no matter how idealistic they are, they'll say, I can't just do something. People actually have to support it. There has to be political will. You know, we have a democracy. The government doesn't just dictate everything. People are supposed to push the government. And so what Marshall found was that people weren't really pushing the government to adopt specific, effective policies to limit carbon emissions. People were angry about it, they were having rallies, they were writing letters, but not organized in a way that would make the government react. So in 2009, 3 of the original members of Citizens Climate Lobby went to Capitol Hill and had a couple of meetings. In 2010, we were 27 volunteers. In 2011, 82. In 2012, we were 180, and in 2013, we had 367 volunteers on Capitol Hill on one day, the most people ever on Capitol Hill to talk about climate. This year, the chief climate policy expert at the Sierra Club said, no one has more meetings on the climate issue than Citizens Climate Lobby does. No one anywhere in the world. And so the reason we have those meetings is to make sure that government knows we care about this and they can actually do something. We now have 146 local chapters in the US, Canada, Sweden, and as of yesterday, Bangladesh. Tonight, Marshall Saunders, the founder, is speaking to his friends in India about starting up 1 or more groups there. Tomorrow, I and another of our leaders are going to be speaking to people who are going to be starting groups in Belgium and Spain. England, France, Switzerland are already on the way and thinking about getting started. And so why are we doing all of this? Because if people actually talk directly to government, we can change things. We now have 3,500 active volunteers. And when I say active volunteers, I have some of them here. Active volunteers in Citizens Climate Lobby are always working, right? It could be 5 minutes a week or 10 minutes a week or 20, but a lot of our volunteers spend many hours a week working on this issue. So they may not be in Washington, D.C., but they're communicating with the community, with the press, and with government. For December 31st of next year, so by the beginning of 2015, our goal is to have at least 300 local volunteer chapters in the United States, covering all 435 congressional districts, so that every single member of the House of Representatives and the Senate will be, as we like to say, in a relationship with a member of Citizens Climate Lobby. They'll have someone they know by name, who contacts them regularly, whom they've met, and who they're going to keep meeting, because that person's never going to go away. So, a few years ago, we thought it was funny. We're converting skeptics. We try really hard, although it's not our focus. Our focus is not to convert skeptics, it's to actually just make the thing happen. And so we used to go there and have a meeting here, a meeting there. Any chance we could get, we would go. And now, this year, we get invited into the Capitol building to meet with the leadership of both parties. Yes, the Republican Party leadership met face-to-face with our volunteers, and it was a positive experience. So, in 2013 so far, we've had 1,030 letters to the editor published across the United States and Canada, 204 op-eds, 98 news articles based on our work with newspapers, 88 TV and radio interviews. We've met with 38 editorial boards to talk to them about their responsibility on telling the truth about this issue and on leading in terms of creating support for the right policies. 40 editorials have come from those newspapers and others where we haven't met with them. And we've had 597 community outreach events. These numbers are as of this morning, because every day they keep ballooning. And we've met with 668 different, well, not different, we've had 668 meetings with congressional and parliamentary offices in the US and Canada in just this year. So the result is, since 2011, we've actually had 3 different bills introduced, at least into committees in the House or Senate, that are modeled on fee and dividend. There are 3 more that are in the works, at least. And next year, there'll probably be one introduced that might get out of committee and go to a full vote in some way. We're looking at getting members of both parties together. We don't treat anyone as the enemy. We talk to everybody as someone who could actually be a hero on this issue. If there's a Republican from your congressional district who has in the past been skeptical, they should know that in September, the IPCC's 5th assessment report basically settled the science. If they were skeptical and they had questions, the scientists looked at those questions, they said, let's see if the past science is right or wrong. Now we know a lot more. And each of those main skeptical arguments was answered. So they can now get involved in solutions, and they should, because the costs are getting to be out of control all over the United States. Some of you may know Jim Hansen. He's maybe the world's most prominent climate scientist, former head of NASA's Goddard Space Institute, Columbia University professor, and he says that if you want to join the fight to save the planet, to save creation for your grandchildren, there's no more effective step you could take than becoming an active member of this group. And it's not because of the group being me or the people that I'm here with or the specific leaders, it's because of what we're trying to do, which is we're putting ordinary people directly in touch with the individuals that have sworn an oath to serve them. And so that changes the game in terms of what the debate is about. It's not just about science, it's not just about economics, it's not just about political capital. It's about whether or not you told the truth when you took that oath. And so, just before I close, we're actually having a Christmas party and fundraiser in Brooklyn on the 15th. And if you'd like to come and hang out, learn more, or just donate some money, there's an Eventbrite page that'll allow you to do that and spread the word. And I want to move along and also say citizensclimatolobby.org, that's our site. And here's ways you can contact me, CCL, and get involved.